Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to do a watercolor and we're going to talk a little bit about art supplies. And this was actually inspired by a friend of mine, Carey, who posted a photo from New Orleans of the St. Louis Cathedral. And this is in Jackson Square. And generally they don't have snow in New Orleans, but they had gotten in like 9 inches of snow last week. And he posted these gorgeous photos and also photos of snow on Bourbon Street. It was wild. And I asked him if I could use this for a painting and he said absolutely. So I love how desaturated the colors are there. You can see the photo in the corner. It just is so ambient and I don't know, it just had a really great, I would say just kind of mood to it. So I thought it'd be really fun to capture in watercolor. And I'm just doing a real quick sketch with some water-soluble graphite. I do have a very faint drawing underneath here. Now I recommend that if you're going to draw on your good art paper to minimize erasing, sketch on some scrap paper first, like copy paper, and then transfer it onto your watercolor paper, because watercolor paper can be a little bit fragile and it doesn't like to have a lot of erasing, and sometimes erasers can smear your graphite. Now this is paper that I've held on to for a couple of years. I was saving it for the best project, but look what happened to the edge of that paper. See how the water is absorbing right into it and you can see the paper looks translucent? The sizing has started to go bad on this paper, and this was such a bummer because a beautiful viewer, Fanna, had sent this to me because I really wanted to try Milford paper because it was supposedly made just like the vintage Whatman paper, but I was waiting for the perfect thing, right? And then I waited and waited and waited and the perfect thing never came up, and then I forgot where I put it, and then I found it again when I was cleaning the studio. And I'm like, oh, I'll use that there. I'll use it with the new tourmaline watercolors that Lora sent me. This is like a community project here. So many community members have helped with this project. And I'm like, oh, that will be great because it's such a hard size paper. I'll get all this granulation. It'll be beautiful. And then I saw the edge of that paper and I'm like, oh no, how is the rest of this paper going to react? And I decided I was going to keep using it and see how this painting came out, because I figured best case scenario, it turns out all right. Worst case scenario, I've done a study to do the painting maybe in oils later on a larger canvas. So I figured I would just kind of go with the flow, roll with the punches there, and it would be also a good opportunity to talk about what to do when your paper goes bad. Oh, and if you'd like a real-time version of this painting, it's a quick one. It's about an hour long. It's up now in Critique Club over at lindsayweirich.teachable.com. I'll put a link in the video description if you want to go check it out. And yeah, like I said, it took an hour to finish. And actually, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to add some collage to it. Seeing that edge, I thought for sure I was going to have to do something to cover that up, but when it dried, you really couldn't tell that there was an issue with the sizing. See, that's the thing. Once you paint on paper and it dries and you hang it on the wall, the sizing could go bad at any time in the future, and it doesn't affect the way the painting looks. It affects the painting process and how your paint spreads and blends. You can even see how much darker the paint is over where the sizing has gone bad versus the middle of the paper. So that's another thing. I wanted to put this video up because a lot of times people will ask me, Lindsay, how will I know if the sizing's gone bad on my paper? And well, you just know, when you start painting on it that your paint doesn't want to spread, and then, or you may see kind of like a freckling or speckling of the paper surface, and that's how you know. But if you're painting on your paper and it's acting normally, then your sizing's fine. Now, if your sizing goes bad on your paper, don't fret, don't despair. You can always use it with other mediums. Like I could use this paper with any sort of dry medium. I could also use it with gouache, because gouache doesn't require a particularly sized surface. So, there's definitely things you can do. I can buy sizing and I can resize the paper. In fact, that's something that I'm going to try because this is not my first rodeo, friends. I've had some paper go bad because I am a bit of a paper hoarder. I'm just going to come out and say it. I often will do jobs for different clients and they send extra product just in case I run out and I need it, so I don't have to like slow down a process, especially if I'm working with new products for like trade shows and stuff. And it's just hard to get through it all. And every once in a while you find a package of paper, it's like, oh, the sizing has gone bad. So you can resize it. And that's something I plan on doing a video on. I'm going to try some of the commercially made paper sizing that you can buy. I'm also, you could also gesso it. I could gesso it with gesso and use it for oils or acrylics or some other medium. I could do an underpainting and use it for pastels, or just use pastels or pencils or anything on that paper, and it wouldn't affect those mediums one bit. But it's just for when you want to use it with watercolors, which if you're investing in cotton watercolor paper, you're probably intending to use it with watercolors. And it's very disheartening because this whole sizing thing, I don't think this was really a big issue until a few years ago, because I've got Arches paper from the late 90s that is still holding up great. Now, keep in mind, I store it in pristine conditions. It's in my bedroom, under my bed, where the temperatures and the humidity levels don't fluctuate that much. Where I have issues with my sizing going bad, it's always been in like sketchbooks that I've rode around my car for a while. Maybe they've gotten splashed, because I do a lot of plein air painting, but I do try to use up my sketchbooks pretty quickly that go plein air with me, just because of the fluctuations in environment and whatnot. So it happens to sketchbooks like that ride around in my car or that live in my basement, and I don't use them up quick enough. So, you can definitely prolong the life of your paper by just keeping it in an area that doesn't get a lot of fluctuation. I know certain parts of the world, they have much worse problems with paper going bad. If you live in the tropics, if you live, I know Parka Blogs, Tio, did a video on testing different methods for kind of fixing paper where the sizing's gone bad, because it's more of a prevalent issue where he lives in Singapore. So check out his channel. He's got a great video about that. I'll link it down below so you can have a look at that if you're curious about what methods you might want to use. I'm not a huge fan of watercolor ground. I like to use that as a kind of a watercolor whiteout if I make a mistake. But in general, I don't really like to paint on that surface. It's just there's too much of a color shift. And I don't know, I don't really care for that particular surface that much. So that wouldn't be my first choice. So I guess the moral of the story is use your paper. Use your paper. Don't save it for best. Don't save those materials for the perfect bit of inspiration, because chances are those materials are going to last longer than you think they are, and you're not going to get to be a better painter without using some materials. You've got to use the paint to be a better painter. You've got to use the paper to get the experience so you'll become the painter you want to be. So don't be stingy with it. Use it up. You bought and paid for it so that you could use it. So don't let it sit on a shelf. And if it does go bad, see if you can find a way to recapture it. Like, you can see this paper's dry now. There's maybe a little bit of a knowing where the sizing had gone bad. I can kind of see a little bit of a swoosh, but I think that's fine because it kind of goes with a moody sky, the moody snowy sky there. So it didn't in the end need to be covered up. But yeah, you can always gesso it. You can always resize it. You can do things to bring your paper back. So I just wanted to give you both sides of that coin, but try to use it up and try not to overbuy. Although I know it's tempting if you find a good sale on watercolor paper, because cotton watercolor paper is crazy expensive a lot of the time. So if you do find a deal, you kind of want to stock up. And there's been times where I've kicked myself that I didn't buy more. Like, there was Arches paper, a pack of 10 for like $27 of the 22 by 30 inch sheets a few years ago on Amazon. And I bought it and I used it up in some classes, and I just kicked myself that I didn't buy more because it sold out so quickly. But who knows, if I bought more, it might have gone bad, or I might have had to resize it. And then if I have to add the expense of buying sizing and the labor and adding sizing, then it wouldn't really be quite the deal that it was. So, keep in mind that money in your bank could be earning interest, right? that money could be, you could put that money in a CD and let it earn some interest. And then when you need the supplies, then you could buy the supplies. I think of it that way, I guess. I added some white gouache. My favorite white gouache is Bleed Proof White by Dr. P.H. Martins. I added the snow with that because I wanted to have kind of like an overall scattered snow. And I ended up really liking this just the way it was. So I decided not to do any stamping or collage or any fancy schmancy stuff because I thought it would just kind of cheapen it and detract from it. So that's how the painting ended up. I'm actually pretty happy with it. It's pretty simple, but it was fun to do. And I got to rescue a piece of paper, which I feel pretty good about. If you'd like to see a real-time version of this, you can find it now in Critique Club. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting. And use your stuff.